Welcome to today's video. Take a moment to imagine the world we live in, a world where trade wars rage fiercely, unrelenting and unforgiving. In this realm, nations impose suffocating tariffs, driving the prices of goods to dizzying heights. Global supply chains falter, like fragile threads stretched to the brink of breaking. Businesses, large and small, struggle desperately to survive, while the weight of economic pressure bears down on every individual, from the ordinary worker to the highest leaders. Amidst all this chaos, have you ever paused to ask yourself, how can we preserve peace within our hearts? How can we find a path through this unrelenting storm? Today, I invite you to join me on a remarkable journey, a journey that not only equips us to face the challenges of our time but also offers a completely fresh perspective. We will explore a path that may seem unexpected, yet holds a timeless strength, the teachings of Buddhism. Yes, it's not about complex business strategies or dry economic measures, but rather the profound wisdom passed down through thousands of years, still capable of illuminating our way in this modern era. Buddhism is not merely an ancient philosophy confined to weathered pages of scripture or the quiet stillness of temples. It is also a vibrant source of inspiration, a practical set of tools that helps us navigate the stresses brought on by global trade wars. In today's world, where great economies clash head-on, where greed and competition seem to dictate every decision, the teachings of Buddhism emerge like a lighthouse, reminding us of the core values that can guide us through times of crisis. This journey is not just an exploration of philosophy. It is an invitation to apply these lessons to our real lives, into the way we work, conduct business, and engage with the world around us. Together, we will seek stillness amidst the storm, not to escape it, but to face it with greater strength. And above all, we will discover how each of us, whether an ordinary individual or a leader, can contribute to building a more just and sustainable world of commerce. So, let us begin together. Allow your imagination to guide the way, and as we journey side by side, we will discover that even in the most challenging moments, there is always a path leading to peace and meaning. Welcome to this exploration of applying Buddhist teachings to the context of global trade wars, a journey that I believe will bring us not only understanding but also hope. First, let us talk about good and evil, a foundational concept not only in Buddhist teachings but also in how we perceive the world around us. In Buddhism, good and evil are not mere moral labels we attach to our actions or those of others. They are seeds sown through every thought, word, and deed, seeds that, over time, will sprout and bear either sweet fruit or bitter consequences. Buddhism refers to this process as karma, a fundamental principle that teaches us every action leaves a mark, not just in our own lives but in the vast flow of the world. So, what does this mean in the context of global trade wars, a conflict without gunfire but brimming with tension and instability? Let's pause for a moment to reflect. We are living in an era where nations, big and small, are swept up in fierce economic confrontations. Tariffs are imposed like walls of separation, driving the prices of goods to staggering heights, leaving the end consumer, ordinary workers, families striving to make ends meet, to bear the burden. Large corporations, in an effort to safeguard their profits, often choose to raise product prices to offset the costs incurred from these tariffs. Meanwhile, governments, under the guise of protecting national interests, enforce protectionist policies with little regard for their partners across borders. At first glance, these actions might seem reasonable in the short term, a way to survive amidst an economic storm. But if we look deeper, through the lens of Buddhist teachings, what is truly happening? Imagine a major corporation, employing thousands and serving millions, deciding to hike prices immediately after a new tariff is announced. Initially, this might help them maintain their profit margins, keeping their stock steady on the market. But what is the cost? Consumers, already grappling with financial strain, must now spend more for the same goods, forcing them to cut back on other essentials in life. Smaller suppliers, unable to withstand the pressure of rising costs, might be pushed to the brink of collapse. A ripple of instability begins to form, spreading from one company's decision to an entire economic ecosystem. This is how karma unfolds. A seemingly small action can create waves that touch millions of lives we may never even meet. Buddhism teaches that goodness is not just about avoiding harm but actively cultivating positive value. In the context of trade wars, what might this look like? Consider an alternative scenario. Instead of focusing solely on self-interest, businesses and nations could choose to act for the greater good. Picture a large company that, rather than raising prices to offset tariffs, decides to share the burden with the community, perhaps by trimming its profit margins slightly, supporting smaller suppliers to keep them afloat, or finding ways to streamline operations to maintain stable prices. Imagine a nation that, instead of erecting protectionist barriers, seeks negotiation to preserve cooperation with its partners, ensuring benefits extend beyond its borders to the global community. Take a more specific example. Think of a major electronics manufacturer, an industry often hit hard by trade wars. Suppose this company faces new tariffs from a country supplying critical components. Instead of immediately passing the cost on to consumers, they could choose a different path. They invest in improving production processes, minimizing waste, and even sharing benefits with smaller suppliers by committing to long-term purchases at stable prices. What's the outcome? Not only does this company build trust with its customers and partners, but it also helps maintain stability in the supply chain, a network we all rely on. This is how acts of goodness, as taught by Buddhism, can create a positive ripple effect, reaching far beyond what we might imagine. Conversely, when decisions are driven by greed or selfishness, the long-term consequences are inevitable. Look at reality. Protectionist policies might shield some domestic industries in the short term, but they also harm others that depend on imported goods. Small businesses, lacking the resources to compete in a market strangled by tariffs, are gradually squeezed out. Consumers, with increasingly tight budgets, lose access to products they once considered essential. The instability doesn't stop at one nation or industry, it spreads globally, like an economic tsunami no one can fully predict. Buddhism encourages us to look beyond immediate gains, toward actions that foster harmony and sustainability. Imagine a world where trade decisions are no longer dictated by greed, where business leaders and policymakers don't just think of their profits or power, but also of the workers toiling in factories, the families struggling to make ends meet, and the future generations who will inherit this planet. In that world, a company isn't just a profit-making machine but a part of the community, a being with responsibilities not only to shareholders but to society as a whole. Another example. Consider a small nation reliant on exports for survival. When faced with tariffs from a larger partner, instead of retaliating with similar measures, this nation could choose negotiation, seeking collaboration, and even supporting its domestic industries to adapt to the new reality without harming international ties. This requires patience, compassion, and far-reaching vision, qualities Buddhism holds in high esteem. The result is not just survival, but sustainable growth, where all parties can thrive together. Now, let's imagine even deeper. A world where kindness becomes the primary force behind every trade decision. Businesses no longer compete to crush one another but work together to elevate the quality of life. Nations no longer build barriers but extend open hands to share resources and opportunities. This isn't a fanciful dream, it's a real possibility if we dare to shift our perspective and our actions. And it's precisely in the chaos of trade wars, when everything seems to teeter on the edge of despair, that Buddhism's lesson about good and evil shines brightest. This is the first lesson Buddhist teachings offer us on this journey, that every action, no matter how small, holds the power to shape the world. When we choose goodness over evil, when we act for the collective benefit rather than personal gain, we don't just ease economic tension, we lay the groundwork for lasting harmony. Let this idea settle in your mind, because as we continue to explore other facets of Buddhist wisdom, you'll see that everything is interconnected, from the smallest decisions in boardrooms to the grandest shifts on the global stage. Next, let us step together into a profound and central concept of Buddhist teachings, dependent origination. This is not some distant or abstract notion, but a deeply meaningful way of seeing the world, a perspective that reveals how every object and every event is intricately linked within a vast web of existence. In Buddhism, nothing stands alone, independent of everything else. All things lean upon one another, arising from a tapestry of causes and conditions interwoven through time and space. Pause for a moment to let this sink in. The phone you hold in your hand, the coffee you sipped this morning, they are the fruits of thousands of connections, from the farmer tending crops in a far-off land, to the workers assembling devices in a factory, to the economic policies that shape their cost. So what does dependent origination mean when we apply it to the context of global trade wars, a struggle that seems to ensnare everyone, leaving no one untouched? Let's imagine this together. When a nation decides to raise tariffs on imported goods, what happens? A wave of impact begins to ripple outward. Companies reliant on materials from that nation face higher costs. To compensate, they increase their prices, and ultimately, it's the consumers, you and I, who pay more for the things we need. The global supply chain, a delicate network tying economies together, starts to tremble. A factory in one country might scale back production due to a shortage of materials, leading to hundreds of workers losing their jobs. Escalating prices don't just strain our wallets, they destabilize entire industries that might seem unrelated at first glance. This is dependent origination in action. A decision that seems simple in one corner of the world can send waves that touch the lives of millions. But the beauty of dependent origination doesn't lie solely in recognizing these negative effects. It also opens a path toward positive action, a way to choose differently and create better outcomes. Consider the opposite. Instead of letting greed or fierce competition drive them, a business could choose collaboration. Picture a large corporation that, rather than focusing solely on maximizing profits through cost-cutting or price hikes, decides to work more closely with its suppliers. They might sign long-term contracts to ensure stable pricing or invest in solutions that make the entire supply chain more sustainable. What's the result? They not only shield themselves from market volatility but also generate lasting value, not just for themselves, but for society and the environment around them. Dependent origination reminds us of something vital. Every business decision, no matter how small, never affects only the one who makes it. It's like a stone dropped into a still lake. The ripples spread out, touching everything in their path, from the workers in a factory, to the families buying products, to the very earth we all depend on. Let's take a concrete example to bring this into focus. Imagine a clothing manufacturer deciding to shift to a sustainable model. Instead of using cheap materials from polluting sources, they opt for organic cotton from eco-friendly farms. They invest in technology to reduce water use during production and commit to paying fair wages to their workers. What happens next? This company doesn't just lessen its harm to nature. Like polluted rivers or depleted resources, it sends a powerful message. Competitors take notice. Other suppliers begin to adapt. Consumers, seeing the value in sustainable products, gradually shift towards supporting responsible brands. A single action inspires an entire ecosystem to move towards something better. Let's imagine even further. In the midst of trade wars, as nations clash with tariffs and barriers, what if one country chose a different path? Instead of retaliating with matching measures, they could extend a hand of cooperation, seeking trade agreements that benefit both sides. They might invest in domestic industries to adapt to the new reality, but without severing ties with international partners. The outcome isn't just economic stability at home. It's a stronger global network where everyone can thrive together rather than drag each other down. This is the power of dependent origination. When we understand that everything is interconnected, we begin to see our responsibility stretching far beyond ourselves, encompassing the greater picture of the world. But dependent origination isn't just a theory, it's a call to action. In today's business world, where the pressure to compete never seems to relent, we often get caught in the mindset that only ruthless struggle ensures survival. Yet through the lens of dependent origination, another way emerges. Think of a business owner facing disruption from tariffs. Instead of sinking into a race to cut costs or hoard profits, they could choose to build lasting relationships with partners, invest in creative solutions, and place the well-being of the community above personal gain. This takes patience, vision, and a touch of faith in the principle that what we plant today will blossom tomorrow. Picture a world where every business decision is made with an awareness of dependent origination. Companies no longer see each other as enemies but as links in the same chain of value. Nations don't erect walls of separation but build bridges of connection. Consumers don't shop based solely on price but on the impact of products on society and the environment. In that world, trade wars cease to be a battle for winners and losers. They become an opportunity for us to reshape how the global economy works, together. Understanding dependent origination doesn't just clarify our role in the global picture, it gives us the motivation to act differently. A sustainable manufacturer isn't just a rare exception, it can become the spark that ignites change. A nation choosing collaboration over confrontation can set an example for others to follow. Every small step, every mindful decision, is part of a vast web, a web we weave together. So as we reflect on dependent origination in the context of trade wars, let's remember that no action stands alone. Everything is connected, from a nation's tariff increase, to the prices in your local store, to the air we breathe each day. Grasping this, we don't merely remain participants in the global economy, we become creators, with the power to shape a future that's more sustainable, more harmonious. This is the lesson dependent origination offers us, that in the interdependence of all things, each of us has a role to play. In a world brimming with pressure, where each day seems to bring new challenges, inner peace becomes the most precious treasure we can hold. Picture our modern lives for a moment. The relentless stream of news about economic upheaval, the tense meetings in boardrooms, the invisible weight of changes beyond our control. Amidst all this, how do we find a sanctuary for our hearts and minds? Buddhism offers an answer, a response that is both simple and profoundly powerful. No matter how chaotic the external world becomes, we can still nurture a stillness within through meditation and mindfulness. This isn't some distant idea reserved for recluses dwelling in remote forests. It's a practical practice, an anchor accessible to anyone, from the everyday worker to the corporate leader, to navigate the storms of life. Let's imagine a scene together. Picture this. A businessperson sits in their office, facing a daunting decision on the front lines of a trade war. Perhaps their company has just learned that a key supplier has been hit by new tariffs, disrupting the flow of essential materials. Revenue is at risk, the team is anxious, and the market churns with uncertainty. In that moment, the pressure weighs on them like a massive stone. The typical reaction might be panic, frantic phone calls, heated debates in meetings, or a rushed, makeshift solution. But what if they chose a different path? Imagine them pausing, finding a quiet corner amidst the chaos, sitting down, closing their eyes, and taking a deep breath. They let the breath flow into their body, carrying calmness, and release the clinging worries of the mind. In that stillness, they find not just peace but clarity, a wise, balanced solution born not from fear but from a place of calm. This is the value of inner peace that Buddhism so deeply emphasizes. Meditation and mindfulness aren't elaborate rituals, they are simple tools to return to ourselves. When we breathe with awareness, when we take a moment to listen to the quiet voice within rather than being swept away by the outer turmoil, we carve out a space to think more clearly, to act more wisely. For the businessperson in our example, that stillness might lead to a creative idea, perhaps negotiating with a new supplier, or finding ways to optimize existing resources to weather the crisis. Instead of letting stress dictate their choices, they become a guide, not just for themselves, but for those around them. And here's the beauty of it. Inner peace doesn't stop with the individual. It has the power to ripple outward. Imagine this. Our businessperson, having reclaimed their calm, walks into a meeting with their team. Rather than bringing tension or urgency, they carry a steady presence. They encourage everyone to pause for a moment, to breathe together, to approach the problem from a fresh perspective. The peace within them becomes a gentle breeze, sweeping through the group, helping everyone focus, innovate, and work more effectively. A positive work environment begins to take shape, not through grand proclamations, but through the quiet stillness of one person who chose to meet difficulty with a tranquil heart. This is how the practice of mindfulness transforms not just the individual, but the collective, from a small office to an entire organization. Yet we must understand one crucial thing: inner peace is not about escaping reality. In the context of trade wars, when everything seems to be crumbling, from disrupted supply chains to shareholder demands, sitting in meditation doesn't mean turning our backs on the world. Quite the opposite, it's a way to face reality with greater strength. Buddhism teaches that stillness isn't passivity, it's the foundation for mindful action. When the mind is scattered, we're prone to rash decisions, swayed by emotions or external pressures. But when the mind is at peace, we see more clearly, listen more deeply, and act with a resolve unshaken by the storms outside. Consider this in our daily lives. It doesn't have to be a businessperson facing tariffs, it could be any of us. An office worker overwhelmed by deadlines, a parent worried about rising living costs, a student staring into an uncertain future amid a turbulent economy. When pressure strikes, our first instinct is often stress, anxiety, or a rush to do something, anything, to get out of the situation. But what if we paused, just for a few minutes, to breathe, to feel our body and mind? What would shift? We'd realize we don't need to flee or fight the pressure. Instead, we can meet it, walk through it, and even turn it into a chance to grow. Inner peace, then, is a gift, not just for ourselves, but for those around us. In the midst of trade wars, where instability feels inevitable, the practice of meditation and mindfulness becomes a guiding light. It helps us hold steady amid ceaseless upheaval, and more importantly, it allows us to share that steadiness with others. Imagine a world where leaders, instead of being swept into a whirlwind of stress, choose to lead with calm. A world where teams work not in anxiety but in trust and creativity. This isn't a far-off dream, it's something we can start today, in the small, quiet moments of our lives. So when we speak of the value of inner peace, let's remember it's more than a state of mind, it's a strength. A strength that keeps us grounded in the storm, that guides us to wise decisions, and that inspires those around us. In this journey of applying Buddhist teachings to the context of trade wars, inner peace is a key, not to run from reality, but to embrace it with courage and clarity. Finally, let us explore together a beautiful and profound aspect of Buddhist teachings: loving kindness and compassion. These are not mere emotions or lofty ideals, they are living principles with the power to transform how we engage with the world, especially in an age as conflicted as ours. Consider the landscape we inhabit. A world where nations clash through tariffs, where businesses fiercely compete for advantage, and where economic instability fractures relationships. Amidst all this tension, is there room for loving kindness and compassion? Buddhism answers that not only is there room, these qualities can fundamentally reshape the way we conduct commerce, turning it from a struggle for survival into a journey of connection and harmony. In Buddhist philosophy, loving kindness and compassion are not vague or passive feelings. They are conscious acts, choices we make to bring benefit not just to ourselves but to others. In a business realm often dominated by profit and rivalry, this might sound far-fetched, but let's look closer together. What happens when a company acts with compassion? Imagine a large corporation operating in the midst of a trade war. One of their suppliers, perhaps a smaller business, is struggling heavily because new tariffs have driven up production costs. The typical response might be to exploit the situation, demand lower prices, impose harsher terms, or even cut ties to find a cheaper alternative. But what if this company chooses compassion instead? Rather than taking advantage of their partner's hardship, they offer support, perhaps by extending payment deadlines, sharing some of the added costs, or collaborating to find a way through the crisis. What's the outcome? They not only help their partner survive but forge a bond built on trust and mutual respect, a relationship that stands strong over time. Let's dive into a more specific example. Picture a furniture manufacturer reliant on wood imported from a country hit by steep tariffs. Their wood supplier, a small family business, is teetering on the edge of collapse, unable to compete with soaring costs. The furniture company could easily switch to another supplier to save money. But if they choose compassion, they take a different route. They sit down with the supplier, discussing ways to weather the storm together, perhaps committing to long-term purchases at stable prices or helping them invest in technology to lower production costs. This requires a short-term sacrifice, maybe slimmer profits for a few months, but in return, they secure a reliable partner and build a more stable supply chain. This compassionate act isn't just a noble gesture, it's a wise strategy, fostering sustainability and unity in the long run. But compassion doesn't stop there, it ripples outward. When a business acts with loving kindness, it sends a powerful message to others in the industry. Competitors might begin to rethink how they treat their partners. Other suppliers might feel encouraged to collaborate rather than focus solely on self-interest. And consumers, increasingly attuned to ethical business practices, might shift toward supporting companies that demonstrate compassion in their actions. A single act, rooted in loving kindness, can spark a wave of positive change, reaching far beyond what we might envision. One key thing to understand is that compassion is not weakness. In the commercial world, where toughness and decisiveness are often praised, it's easy to assume that acting with compassion signals vulnerability, an invitation to be exploited. But Buddhism teaches us otherwise. Compassion is a strength that demands courage, patience, and far-reaching vision. To support a struggling partner instead of taking advantage requires faith in the enduring value of relationships. To choose collaboration over competition takes the resolve to look past short-term losses toward a shared good. This isn't weakness, it's the power of an open heart, willing to prioritize harmony and unity over personal gain. Imagine a world of commerce where compassion becomes the guiding principle. Businesses no longer see each other as foes to defeat but as companions on a shared path. Leaders don't just focus on next quarter's profits but on the lives of workers, partners, and the communities they serve. In the context of trade wars, where conflict seems inevitable, compassion could be the bridge, a way to heal rifts and rebuild trust between parties. A company that chooses to uplift rather than exploit not only strengthens its own standing but inspires a new way of doing business, one grounded in kindness and responsibility. Loving kindness and compassion, then, are not just spiritual values, they are practical tools for changing the world. In this journey, as we face the stresses of trade wars, let's remember that every compassionate act, no matter how small, can make a difference. It not only builds enduring relationships but plants seeds for a more positive future. Buddhism teaches us that true strength lies not in overpowering others but in lifting them up. And in a world rife with conflict, this is the final lesson we can carry forward, a lesson about the power of compassion to foster unity and hope. We've walked together through a meaningful journey, and I hope this video has brought you something of value. If you found it helpful, even just a spark of inspiration or a fresh perspective, please press the like button to show your support, share it with friends and family to spread this message, and subscribe to the channel to join us for more content ahead. I'd love to hear your thoughts, so take a moment to leave a comment below. What do you think about applying Buddhist teachings to our lives and work? Every reflection you share is a source of encouragement for me to continue offering more meaningful insights. As we've seen, Buddhist teachings are not just profound philosophies resting on pages or within the quiet walls of temples. They are living, practical tools that help us live better, especially in times of crisis like these trade wars. From understanding good and evil, to the interconnectedness of dependent origination, from the strength of inner peace to the power of compassion, these lessons don't just guide us through challenges, they light a path toward a more harmonious, sustainable world. I believe that with each small step we take, we can together create a ripple of profound change. Thank you for sharing this time with me on this journey. Your presence here is a precious gift, and I look forward to meeting you again in future videos. May your day be filled with peace and purpose. Until next time.